When Jack Marlowe stepped off the rust-scarred transport shuttle onto the landing platform of Cyrilla 9, he had two things on his mind: renewing his freelance trading license and finding the nearest lavatory. What he wasn't expecting was a brass band composed entirely of vibrating fungi, or the fact that they were playing something suspiciously like Earth's national anthem, with several misplaced notes and at least one unexpected drum solo. Cyrilla 9 smelled like boiling algae and ozone. It was a planet of sleek domes, hovering trams, and a skyline tangled with anti-gravity cables. Jack, a man whose most advanced piece of technology was a self-heating coffee mug, already felt outdated. He adjusted the collar of his rumpled jacket, wondering if the customs agent would notice the duct tape holding his data badge together. He was ushered into the Port Authority dome by a service drone, with a voice like an angry librarian. Inside, the room shimmered with projected data, flashing laws and fees in every galactic dialect. At the far end of the counter, a customs official with silver skin and 6 disproportionately long fingers blinked its 3 vertical eyes at Jack. "Full name?" it droned. "Jack Marlowe, trader, Earth origin, here for permit renewal and, not much else." The being tapped a few glowing symbols on a crystalline panel. There was a pause, a strange whirring sound. Then an alert flashed across the air, casting red light over Jack's confused face. "According to Section 483B of the Unified Galactic Matrimonial Accords," the customs agent said in a tone of absolute apathy, "you are hereby required to enter into marital contract with no fewer than 3 eligible citizens of member species. You will be escorted to selection orientation shortly. Congratulations." Jack stared at the being for several full seconds. "I'm sorry, did you just say marital contract? With 3 people?" The agent's only response was to push a small pink button. Confetti exploded from the ceiling. A holographic banner unfurled. "Welcome to wedlock, Jack Marlowe." It was accompanied by the triumphant blare of a kazoo choir. "Hold on, this must be a mistake. I didn't sign anything. I just got here. I haven't even peed yet." "The law is binding. Your signature was acquired via biometric scan as you stepped onto the platform. Please enjoy the complimentary fruit basket." A levitating tray floated toward him, wobbling with neon-colored fruits that steamed slightly and gave off a scent not unlike old pickles. One of them blinked at him. "I'm allergic to fruit with eyes," Jack muttered, backing away. Before he could protest further, 2 short spherical robots rolled in and flanked him, projecting soothing messages like, "Love is unity and share the cosmos. Share yourself," in pale blue cursive. "Wait, I demand an appeal, or at least a translator. This is insane." But the robots were already guiding him, politely but firmly, into a side corridor marked Selection Orientation. The doors sealed behind him with a soft ding of finality. The orientation chamber was the size of a small stadium. Jack found himself seated at the center of a circular stage under a spotlight. Rows of viewing platforms surrounded him, each occupied by representatives from different species, some vaguely humanoid, others best described as enthusiastic piles of sentient feathers. An overly cheerful hologram appeared above him, a humanoid woman with a permanently smiling face, metallic gold hair, and eyes that blinked out of sync. "Congratulations, Jack Marlowe. By Galactic Regulation 483-B, you have been selected to aid in interspecies unity through the sacred rite of polybonded matrimony. Let's meet your candidates." "Oh, this can't be real," Jack whispered, burying his face in his hands. The hologram winked. "First up, Kalira of the Alari Dominion." A shimmering doorway opened to reveal a tall, statuesque woman with deep blue skin, piercing gold eyes and long ears that angled back like graceful blades. She wore an armored tunic etched with glowing runes, and moved with the fluid grace of someone who could break your bones, and then lecture you about posture. Kalira stepped onto the stage and gave Jack a nod of appraisal. "Human, you appear fragile. Do you possess any martial experience at all?" "I once got in a bar fight with a vending machine," Jack offered. She frowned. "We have much work to do." Next, the hologram trilled, Candidate number 2, Thrixa of Olnara. A translucent tube filled with shimmering water emerged, revealing a creature that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a lava lamp. Thrixa pulsed in vibrant pinks and greens, tendrils swaying in slow rhythm. She communicates through thermoelectric pulses, the hologram explained. We've installed a temporary translator module for your convenience. The module chirped, warm welcome, delight pressure, want touch small mouth. Jack blinked. I think she means she's pleased to meet me, the module buzzed. Yes, and would like to discuss the ritual of mucus exchange. Next, Jack yelped. And finally, the hologram announced, Zila of Arcs. A portal opened, releasing a blur of motion and sparks. Zila landed on the stage mid-backflip, grinning. She wore mismatched tech gear, her silver hair floating as if constantly caught in low gravity. Her eyes glowed faint violet, and her fingers tapped against an invisible interface in midair. Hey there, future husband, she said, smirking. Hope you're into hacking, hover chases, and irresponsible fun. You hacked into this, didn't you? Jack narrowed his eyes. You tampered with the system. Zila's grin widened. You'd rather get married or get deported to the Glorbian paper mines. I don't even know what that means. You don't want to know. By the end of the session, Jack had a headache, 3 prospective wives, and a ceremonial cape he was told to wear to honor the moment. It itched and glowed and said, Property of Galactic Matrimonial Council on the back in bold pink letters. Back in his assigned quarters, an oblong pod with mood lighting and a suspiciously heart-shaped bed. Jack stared at the ceiling and tried to process his new reality. A blue-skinned warrior who thought he needed daily combat drills, a goo-based empath who thought mucus was a love language, and a tech goblin who hacked intergalactic law for fun. Oh God, Jack groaned, covering his face with a pillow. I'm going to die married. From a speaker in the ceiling, the cheerful hologram's voice chimed in. Correction! Galactic records indicate you will be married before you die. Congratulations again, Jack Marlowe. He screamed into the pillow. Jack Marlowe woke to the sensation of being watched by something soft, squishy, and slightly damp. He cracked one eye open and found Thrixa's largest appendage gently pressing a bioluminescent petal to his forehead. Emotional temperature, lukewarm, oxygen intake, distressed, cortisol levels, medium crisis, her translator module chirped from a corner of the room. Good morning to you too, Jack groaned, pushing himself up from the bed shaped suspiciously like a giant seashell. The room's walls adjusted color to match his mood, currently a kind of anxious taupe. Why are you in my room? Actually, no. Why aren't you a safe distance away from my respiratory system? Touch reduces hormonal volatility, Thrixa's voice translated smoothly. Also, cuddling is pre-breakfast ritual. Cuddling is a privilege, not a protocol, Jack muttered, and breakfast should never involve suction cups. Before Thrixa could respond with what he feared was an attempt to demonstrate affectional adhesion, the pod's door unsealed with a hiss, and Kalira marched in like a parade of doom. She carried a bundle wrapped in crimson cloth, which she set down with reverence. It is time, she declared, nodding at Jack. For what exactly? Please say brunch. Kalira pulled the cloth aside to reveal an array of polished weapons. Spears, blades, things that glowed angrily when touched. Combat compatibility evaluation. Jack blinked. I didn't realize that was still a thing in modern relationships. All unions in the Alari Dominion are preceded by battle. How else can we determine your resilience under emotional pressure? I usually just cry in the shower, Jack said. That's worked fine so far. Zila zipped in next, hovering on a small anti-grav board that she'd clearly stolen from somewhere important. Her hair was streaked with blue light, and she wore goggles that projected unreadable data across the lens. Someone say battle? She chirped. Because I just hacked into the planetary arena scheduling system and booked us a slot. Also, Jack, you've been accidentally signed up for the Interplanetary Bachelor Games. It's a televised event now. Jack blinked again. You what? Hey, don't look at me like that. We needed funding for the group honeymoon. I don't even know what species half of me is honeymooning with. Thrixa waved a gentle tendril. Mine involves communal egg listening and a song composed by Bubbles. Kalira added, in Ilari tradition, we fire spears into the night sky and howl at the moons. Zila shrugged. Mine mostly involves drinking and minor property damage. Jack buried his face in his hands. I need tea, or an escape pod. An hour later, Jack found himself standing on the edge of a large open-air arena, surrounded by a crowd of wildly cheering aliens. Some floated, some flapped. One kept vomiting glitter. Drone cams buzzed overhead, broadcasting the event across every inhabited quadrant of the galaxy. A booming voice declared, welcome, citizens of the stars, to this cycle's Galactic Bachelor Games, featuring our lucky human, Jack Marlowe. A wave of confetti cannons fired across the stands. One of the confetti bits stuck to Jack's forehead. It read, we ship you with everyone. Today's events, the announcer continued, include emotional interrogation, romantic obstacle navigation, and the final trial, the gauntlet of compatibility. Zila handed Jack a small device. This syncs to your heart rate. The more flustered you get, the more ridiculous the challenges become. Oh, good, Jack muttered. A stress-reactive obstacle course. That's exactly what my therapist warned me about. The first event began. Jack was seated in a chair shaped like an open clam, while each of the three women asked him emotionally loaded questions in front of the crowd. Kalira leaned in. If I were gravely wounded in battle, would you leave me behind to save the mission? Jack hesitated. What kind of wound are we talking? Paper cut? Missing limb? Emotional trauma? The clam chair vibrated disapprovingly. Thrixa pulsed brighter. Would you allow me to consume your DNA to create a secondary fusion being for long-term companionship? That depends, Jack said slowly. Would this fusion being be more or less neurotic than me? The audience roared with laughter. Zila grinned. If I told you I erased your debt record from the Interstellar Loan Corps, but also your birth record and planetary citizenship, would you still love me? Jack blinked. Did you actually do that? Define actually. The next event involved dodging affection-themed drones that sprayed scented foam while navigating a maze shaped like a heart. Jack slipped twice, accidentally proposed to a shrub, and came out covered in glitter and what may have been edible emotions. By the time they reached the final event, the gauntlet of compatibility, Jack was panting, coated in sticky biogel, and trying to figure out whether his left boot had achieved sentience. The gauntlet itself was a floating labyrinth filled with shifting platforms, glowing questions, and challenges like, share a truth you've never told anyone, while hanging from a levitating crystal vine. Kalira went first. She caught every challenge like a predator stalking purpose. My truth, she said at one point, is that I fear softness. I envy it. Jack swallowed hard. Thrixa floated through with grace, pausing before a pulsing orb and humming a song so low it made Jack's bones hum. My truth, I do not understand loneliness. I want to. Zila cartwheeled her way through, reprogramming obstacles mid-leap. At the final node, she stared at Jack and said, my truth? I didn't hack the law to get you. I hacked it because I didn't want you to disappear. When Jack reached the end, bruised and bewildered, the crowd roared and the holographic host reappeared. Congratulations, you've completed all trials. And now, the proposal. Jack froze. The women turned to him. I thought this was all mandatory, he said. But if I have to choose, a glitch crackled in the hologram's voice. Correction. Due to Clause 17B-6, proposals must come from all parties voluntarily or the contracts are void. All three women turned slowly to look at each other, then at him, then surprisingly at each other again. I'm not here because of law, Kalira said, but because I see strength where you see panic. I am uncertain, Thrixa murmured, but I wish to learn, and you are not unpleasant. I think I'm glitching emotionally, Zila said, but I don't hate it. The crowd held its collective breath, and then Kalira crossed her arms and said, we need to talk. Jack sighed in relief. Oh, thank God, I thought we were skipping the dramatic pause. They walked off the stage, a human and three wildly incompatible alien women, talking, laughing, and arguing all at once. Somewhere above, the drone cams kept filming. Ratings were through the roof. Jack Marlowe had once been the kind of man who avoided eye contact with strangers, skipped small talk with bartenders, and instinctively ducked behind furniture when someone mentioned the word commitment. Now he was gliding through low orbit in a transparent shuttle shaped like a heart, wearing a suit that sparkled slightly every time he sighed. His arm was linked with Kalira's. Thrixa floated just behind, her gel-like form humming in quiet pulses. Zila was piloting the craft manually, which probably violated several dozen flight regulations. They were not married, not yet, and that was precisely the miracle. After the bachelor games, after the awkward group therapy session with a four-headed relationship counselor, and after narrowly escaping being turned into a reality holo-series, working title Jack and the Intergalactic Wives, Jack had made a choice that shocked even himself. He'd asked for time, not to escape, not to fake his death using a clone decoy and a forged stasis pod, Zila's backup plan, but to actually get to know them. So the Galactic Matrimonial Council gave him 30 rotation cycles, a mere month in Earth terms, to build what they called organic alliance structures. Jack called it not rushing into planetary polygamy like a lunatic. The first week had been weird. Kalira, trained in war diplomacy and zero-G combat, had insisted on daily bonding drills, which involved dueling with stun staffs while reciting shared affirmations. "I respect your courage, but your footwork is unacceptable," she had growled lovingly. Jack had bruises in places he hadn't known existed. Thrixa had taken him to a bioluminescent lake on her home moon, where they sat in silence for hours, their feet dangling in water that glowed brighter with each passing thought. She showed him memories through scent and vibration, her people's long migration through asteroid fields, their fear of solitude, their songs composed from atmospheric disturbances. "I always thought I was bad at emotions," Jack whispered once, as the lake pulsed warmly around him. Thrixa had leaned close, her voice gentle. "You are simply unpracticed, like a hatchling learning gravity." Zila, of course, had hacked into a retired orbital station and turned it into their private retreat, complete with malfunctioning vending machines and a karaoke console that only played late 20th century Earth hits. "You need chaos," she told him, flipping upside down and floating past his head. "But the fun kind, not the legal kind." He'd stared at her. "There's a fun kind of chaos?" "There is if you're kissing someone while it happens." It turned out she wasn't wrong. Over time, the impossibly incompatible women had become, if not a perfect trio, then something stranger and better. A chaotic blend of sincerity, curiosity, and outright stubbornness. And Jack, against all odds, had stopped trying to escape. Now, as the heart-shaped shuttle descended toward the Galactic Union's Grand Assembly Dome, Jack felt something deep in his chest, equal parts dread and hope. It had taken weeks, compromise, and one incident involving sentient flowers with opinions on fashion, but they had reached a decision. They wouldn't follow the law. They'd rewrite it. The council had expected them to quietly fall into line. What they got was a motion to amend Regulation 483-B of the Unified Galactic Matrimonial Accords, backed by passionate testimonials, an impromptu interpretive dance from Zila, and a surprise legal loophole discovered by Thrixa's second cousin, who was literally a lawyer-shaped cloud. The amendment proposal had one simple idea, that any interspecies union, no matter how politically beneficial, required consent, autonomy, and the messy, wonderful process of choice. And Jack had chosen, not a wife, not 3 wives, but to stay, to build, to be part of something far bigger than himself. The assembly dome buzzed with hundreds of species in their formal wear, shimmering robes, glowing feathers, metallic suits with echo chambers sewn into the sleeves. Jack stood at the center, flanked by Kalira, Thrixa, and Zila. When the head minister asked for final statements, Jack stepped forward. "I didn't come here to get married," he said. "I came to renew a license. I wanted to trade scrap metal and maybe get a decent sandwich. What I got was bureaucracy, confusion, and three people who saw something in me even I didn't know was there. But love, real love, can't be scheduled like a shuttle route. It's a glitchy system that needs debugging. And if we're going to force people into anything, let's make it the chance to choose for themselves. The silence after his speech was deep and heavy. Then came a ripple of agreement, a tremor of languages and species murmuring in resonance. The motion passed. 483-B was repealed, and Jack Marlowe, former bachelor, professional avoider, and amateur galactic heartthrob, was free. Weeks later, the shuttle landed on a remote moon covered in silver grass and floating lanterns. It wasn't a wedding, not officially, but there were vows. Kalira handed Jack a ceremonial blade, blunted for safety, and swore to protect his back in battle and in brunch lines. Thrixa shaped herself into a luminous spiral and played a melody only he could hear, a song about growing roots in unexpected soil. Zila offered him a cracked ring made from scavenged tech. "It might explode," she said, "but only a little." Jack laughed. He cried a little, too, and as the stars shifted above them, blinking in languages older than any known tongue, he realized he wasn't afraid anymore. Not of love, not of change, not even of alien in-laws. He was home. The sky above Virelo 9 was, quite frankly, showing off. Electric blue clouds snaked across the atmosphere like sentient smoke, casting shimmering reflections on the transparent dome of the ceremonial arena. The arena itself was a marvel of over-designed architecture, a spiraling, multi-level coliseum built not so much for function, but for flourish, as if someone had dared an AI to construct a building that looked like it was constantly applauding itself. Commander Rylan Holt stood in the southern gate archway, adjusting the strap on his left pauldron with the same expression one might wear when discovering a surprise expiry date on milk. The armor, if one could still call it that, was a patchwork of Earth's finest pre-singularity engineering, dented in 3 places, scorched in 5, and suspiciously squeaky around the groin. A deep graphite gray with blue-tinted edges, it had once been part of an elite command unit's uniform. Now it mostly served to remind people that Earth soldiers were either brave, stupid, or on a very tight budget. Rylan inhaled slowly, ignoring the hover drones circling overhead with their live feeds beaming across 7 planetary systems. He flexed his fingers in the old gauntlet, stiff, sluggish, and slightly sticky from a protein bar mishap 2 days prior. He hadn't cleaned it, part protest, part laziness. "Commander Holt," a silky voice intoned through the comlink implanted behind his ear, "your opponent is arriving. Please refrain from saluting her forehead. It's considered a mating invitation in her culture." He sighed. "Noted, ceremonial officer. I'll keep my hands and my awkwardness to myself." With a slight hiss of pressurized air, the northern gate of the arena parted. From the mist-stepped Princess Kalith of House Ziver, and the crowd lost its collective mind. She was radiant in that offhandedly lethal way. Tall, upright, her blue skin shimmered subtly under the alien sun, and her golden armor flexed like it was alive, because it was. The suit responded to her every movement like an extension of her will. Tiny kinetic coils whirring softly beneath smooth, almost organic plating. Her ears, long and tapering like an elegant blade, twitched with precision as she surveyed the arena, her eyes flicking briefly toward Rylan. He tried not to shift uncomfortably, or adjust anything, or speak first. She did it for him. "That," she said, gesturing lazily toward his armor with one gloved finger, "is either a museum piece or a cruel joke. Tell me, Commander, do your people often wear relics into battle, or is this your idea of psychological warfare?" Rylan blinked. "This? Oh, no. This is the deluxe model. You should have seen the budget version. Comes with a cork helmet and shoulder pads made of optimism." Kayla's eyes narrowed, but her lips curled slightly. "And here I thought humans didn't believe in comedy. We didn't, until after the Second Mars War. It's how we coped with losing to our own supply bots." There was a pause. She tilted her head, expression unreadable. "You jest. Only about half the time. The other half is just poorly timed honesty." Ceremonial drums began to echo in the distance, deep, rhythmic, and entirely unnecessary given that everyone's internal audio feeds were synced to the moment. Still tradition. Somewhere a choir of 10-throated Zavere monks began to hum the ancient tune of Choral Unity, which sounded suspiciously like a whale humming through a traffic jam. Ryland stepped into the arena's central ring, the warm buzz of the kinetic boundary tingling across his boots. Kalith mirrored him. Her gait was effortless, like she didn't have 1,000 nanofilament circuits interpreting her spinal impulses at every step. He, by contrast, sounded like an old refrigerator with a vendetta. "This duel is symbolic," the announcer intoned in a dozen languages at once, his voice echoing inside every skull with surgical clarity. "It represents the meeting of two empires, Earth's Terran Accord and the Zavere sovereignty. No death, no crippling, just display, mutual respect, and hopefully a good show." "Emphasis on show," Kalith murmured. She took position across from him, blades not yet drawn. Then with theatrical deliberation, she reached up and pressed her palm against her chest plate. Runes flared to life, crawling along the suit in soft gold, then retracted like ink running backward. The armor hissed, unlocked. "What are you doing?" Rylan asked warily. "Leveling the field," she replied, and the armor began to peel away. First the pauldrons, sliding back and vanishing into her spine plate. Then the gauntlets. Then the chest plate, which folded in on itself like a metallic lotus. Beneath it all was a form-fitting underlayer of fabric, simple, silvery, and clearly ceremonial, offering no more protection than a gentle breeze. The crowd collectively gasped. So did Rylan, albeit in a more professional tone. Kalith stood now without her armor, blue skin catching the refracted lights of the arena's upper orbiting rings, ears angled like sensors toward him. She looked entirely vulnerable and entirely unafraid. "This is highly irregular," Rylan said, his voice a bit more scratchy than he'd like. Kalith shrugged, her hands open at her sides. "So is your fashion sense. But here we are." He found himself chuckling before he could stop it. "You realize that was 10 million credits worth of tech you just stripped off in public. 17, actually. The upgraded version has mood lighting." "Of course it does." A moment passed. The crowd was hushed, hungry for action, unsure whether to applaud or call for a medic. But Ryland's blade remained sheathed, and Kalith had yet to summon hers. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the posturing or the elegance, but the glint of challenge in her eyes, one not born of arrogance, but of curiosity, of something testing the limits of ceremony, of expectation. "You're not playing to win," he said quietly. She smiled. "I'm playing to see who you are without your mask." Rylan exhaled. "Great. You had to go straight for the metaphor. Do you Earthmen always hide behind metal and sarcasm?" He grinned. "Only the attractive ones." And for a moment, just a moment, Kalith laughed. A real laugh, light and unguarded. Her ears twitched again, and she folded her arms as if reconsidering something. Then the hum of her personal blade ignited softly in her palm. "Your move, Commander." He drew his saber, steel blue energy hissing into form. Not to strike, not yet, but to meet her in the middle of whatever this duel was becoming. And somewhere far above, the orbiting satellite cameras zoomed in, the feeds going wild as viewers across the galaxy leaned in, watching two warriors on the edge of tradition, disarmament, and something far stranger than diplomacy. Whatever this was, it had only just begun. The ceremonial duel had not ended, strictly speaking. It had simply wandered off course, like a drunken courier drone deciding halfway through its delivery that perhaps enlightenment lay elsewhere. After Princess Kalith's unexpected and very public armor removal, an act that sent half the Galactic Review Board into a conniption and the other half into fan fiction, the officials opted for a brief intermission, which in Virelon 9 terms meant a 70-minute pause accompanied by roasted fungi snacks and holographic interpretive dances that no one understood, but everyone pretended to. Rylan Holt sat alone in the antechamber of the arena, surrounded by softly glowing marble walls and a ceiling that projected a calming image of space whales swimming through nebulae. The room smelled faintly of citrus and a bit more strongly of antiseptic, like someone had recently sanitized an alien hostage negotiation here and wanted to leave a pleasant aftertaste. He flexed his arms, his armor hissing faintly as it recalibrated around his shoulders. A tiny warning light blinked somewhere behind his left ear plate. Joint lubrication low. Please consult a certified mechsmith, or stretch, or die. He ignored it, tapping a control pad on his wrist and watching as a three-dimensional diagram of Kaleth's armor floated into view. The scan was partial, mostly from visual input during their brief standoff, but enough to make him whistle softly. 17 million credits, he muttered, zooming in, and she peeled it off like she was stepping out of a bathrobe. Who does that in the middle of a diplomatic duel? A chirp came from the doorway. The soft glow of light rearranged itself, and then she was there. Kaleth. And you're sitting here unarmored with a guy who once tried to disable a plasma mine by kicking it. She narrowed her eyes. Did it work? Only if you count waking up in orbit, working. Silence again, but softer now, comfortable. Outside the chamber, distant drums resumed, signaling the duel was to be called back into session, but neither of them moved yet. We'll have to finish the fight, Kaleth said, rising to her feet. Or fake it, really convincingly, Rylan offered. She gave him a look. I'm a princess. I don't fake anything. I'm a soldier. I fake being awake half the time. As she walked toward the door, she glanced back over her shoulder. When the fight resumes, don't go easy on me. Wasn't planning on it. And don't hold back just because you like my ears. He grinned. I don't like your ears. She arched a brow. I love your ears. And then, for a heartbeat, her smile returned. And this time it reached her eyes. The doors dissolved again. Outside, the arena waited. So did the rest of the galaxy. But in here, in the quiet chamber filled with jokes, memories, and an unexpected threat of something fragile, something had shifted. Neither of them could say exactly what it was yet, but both of them knew it mattered. The arena shimmered as the heat from Viorello 9's twin suns poured through the crystalline dome, bathing everything in an ethereal orange glow. The ceremonial drums thundered again, but this time they had a certain finality to them, as if even the ancient rhythms understood they were coming to the end of a story that had gone wildly off script. A few thousand feet above, orbital drones caught every angle, broadcasting the closing act of the duel to billions, most of whom were now far more invested in the personal tension than the political stakes. Commander Rylan Holt stood in the center of the arena, his armor freshly buffed in an optimistic attempt at decency, the squeaky knee joint finally silenced, likely through divine intervention or an angry technician with a hammer. Across from him, Princess Kaleth walked slowly into the ring once more. Her undersuit now bore a new sash, emerald green with a sliver of silver threading, a color only worn during treaties in Zavere tradition. It was a subtle message, a final act. The crowd, sensing the gravity of this moment, quieted. Kaleth stopped just a few paces from him. Her long ears flicked once, her gaze sharp but unreadable. So, Rylan said, breaking the silence, here we are. The epic conclusion. Will there be fireworks or just unresolved emotional trauma? Kaleth's lips curled. I was promised a duel. If I leave without at least a dramatic pose and a sparkly explosion, my ancestors will disown me. Oh, don't worry, Rylan said, drawing his saber slowly. I've been saving a dramatic pose all day. It's called Stance of the Tired Human Who Has No Idea What He's Doing, but is trying really hard to look cool. She activated her own weapon, a slender arc of crystalline energy that hummed a perfect B-flat, and took a step forward. Your form needs work. Tell that to my academy instructor. He said I fought like a drunken octopus with emotional baggage. Was he wrong? Rylan hesitated, then shrugged. Not really. Their blades met, not with fury, not with rage, but with something else. Rhythm, mutual respect. The crowd, expecting an explosive clash, instead watched something far more elegant, a dance of measured movements and playful strikes, an exchange more like conversation than combat. Kaleth spun low, her blade tracing the air beside him. You've improved. Because I'm trying not to die, he grunted. Number, you're trying not to disappoint me. He grinned, parried a strike, and ducked under a sweeping arc. Is that what this is now? A relationship evaluation with swords? I'd consider it efficient multitasking. They clashed again, steel and energy flaring against each other, and then parted, breathing hard but not winded. Every motion was deliberate, every move just short of serious. This wasn't war. This was theater. Rylan stepped back, blade raised. You know, if I'd known flirting in your culture involved weapons, I'd have invested in a better helmet. Kalith raised an eyebrow. That is your better helmet, isn't it? Okay, now you're just being cruel. She smirked, but then the smirk softened. You've changed, she said quietly. Rylan lowered his blade slightly. So have you. The next moment passed without a word, not because they didn't have things to say, but because some things said too quickly lose their weight. Then together, as if rehearsed, they deactivated their weapons. The arena gasped. The announcer fumbled a few syllables in Galactic Basic before finally declaring, "The duel has ended, without a victor, without defeat." Kalith stepped closer, enough that Rylan could see the fine glow along her jawline, the quiet shimmer in her eyes. "I didn't want to win," she said. "I wanted you to understand." He looked at her, all traces of bravado melting. "I do." "Then you'll come with me." That stopped him. "Come with you where?" "To the summit, to the seat of sovereignty. We'll present the treaty together." "I'm not exactly the poster boy for diplomacy," he said. "You've seen what I do to formal wear." "Exactly. You're real. They'll trust that more than 10 polished speeches and a buffet." Rylan looked down at his armor, his worn gauntlet, the tiny burn mark he'd never bothered to clean. He thought of his squad, his scars, the years of loyalty wrapped in sarcasm and duct tape. And then he looked at her, unarmored, honest, willing to be seen. "All right," he said softly, "but only if there's a buffet." In the summit on Alaria Prime was a shimmering tower of glass and air, suspended above an ocean that changed color with the wind. Dignitaries from across the systems gathered to witness the unexpected. A Terran soldier and a Zavere princess walking side by side. No ceremonial duel, no armor, just two people. Kalith wore the same silvery suit, the green sash replaced by white and gold, signaling unity. Rylan had swapped out his battle gear for a sharply pressed diplomatic jacket, though he'd kept the gauntlets, for luck, and because he still hadn't figured out how to remove them without causing a small fire. They stood at the podium, facing a crowd of thousands, and a screen showing billions more. Kalith spoke first, her voice calm and clear. "Our people have long misunderstood each other. We meet in armor. We hide behind it. But strength is not in steel or circuitry. It's in choosing to be seen." Rylan stepped forward. "I came here expecting to prove myself in combat. What I didn't expect was to lose a duel and gain a partner. In every sense." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Kalith raised an elegant hand. "Let history remember this day, not for the blades drawn, but for the ones we sheathed." The room erupted in applause. Later, away from the lights and the cameras, Rylan and Kalith sat on the edge of the summit's balcony, watching the ocean shimmer below. "Still think my ears are your favorite feature?" she asked. Rylan leaned back, arms behind his head. "They're top 5, she grinned. "And what's number 1? He looked at her sideways. "That thing you did when you took off your armor. That moment." She nodded. "You mean when I disarmed you without lifting a weapon?" "I'll never recover," he said dramatically. "You're not supposed to." And in the silence that followed, there were no more duels, no more masks, just stars, and two warriors who had finally stopped fighting long enough to see each other. Zira stood at the edge of the battlefield, the wind whipping against her dark, shimmering armor. The stars above twinkled coldly, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy she had roamed for most of her life. Her keen eyes scanned the horizon, where the remnants of the last skirmish still smoldered. The smell of scorched metal and burnt flesh clung to the air, as familiar to her as the scent of her homeworld, Larnus. To Zira, this was nothing more than another day, another battle won. Yet even in victory, there was always that lingering feeling that something was missing. She had fought in countless wars, from planets with fiery skies to desolate moons. Her reputation as one of the finest warriors among the Ryans, her people, was unparalleled. A warrior who never faltered, a warrior who never feared. She was Zira, and fear wasn't in her vocabulary. But today, something felt different. Her long blue skin glimmered in the pale light of the twin moons that hung high in the sky. Her long ears, sharp and elegant, flicked as a gust of wind swept through them. The way her golden hair moved, almost as though it were alive, was a testament to her people's advanced genetic engineering. It wasn't just her physical appearance that made her unique. No, it was her mind. Zira had always been a master strategist. She didn't just win battles. She annihilated her enemies with precise, calculated moves, leaving them no room to retaliate. "Commander Zira!" A voice crackled over her communicator, snapping her out of her reverie. It was her lieutenant, a young Ryan soldier named Galactic, eager and overly enthusiastic, as always. "Yes, Galactic," Zira responded, her voice cool and measured. "There's word from command. The next assignment, it's Earth," Galactic said. His voice carried a nervous edge, though he tried to hide it. Zira's sharp eyes narrowed, and she tilted her head slightly, a soft hum escaping her lips as she processed the information. "Earth?" Zira repeated, as though she hadn't heard him correctly. "The blue planet?" "Yes, Commander, the very same." There was a brief pause before Galactic added, "I hear they're not very advanced. We should have no problem taking it over." Zira's lips curled into a faint, amused smile, though the expression never quite reached her eyes. She had heard of Earth, an insignificant speck in the galaxy, populated by a primitive species of humans who were no match for the Rayans. Yet for some reason, this assignment didn't sit right with her. She had never fought an enemy that she didn't respect, and the thought of invading a planet that seemed so human was strangely unsettling. "Very well," Zira said, her voice as indifferent as ever. "Prepare the troops. We leave at dawn." As the line went silent, Zira gazed down at her gloved hands, feeling the weight of her weapons, a pair of plasma blades that had tasted the blood of countless enemies. They had never failed her. The Rayans had engineered them to be the most lethal instruments of destruction in the universe. Yet there was a gnawing feeling at the back of her mind, like an itch she couldn't scratch. Earth? What did she know about Earth? About humans? Nothing. And that was perhaps the problem. The following morning, Zira stood at the front of her battalion, watching as the massive warships of the Ryans descended from the sky. They were sleek and menacing, each ship humming with the power of 1,000 engines, their surfaces gleaming with the reflective sheen of alien metals. Zira had fought in many wars, led many invasions, but this one felt strange. Earth wasn't like the other planets they had conquered. Zira could feel it in the air. This place was different. The landing was swift, and within minutes, Zira's forces had set foot on Earth's soil. The planet was a mixture of green landscapes and sprawling cities, its beauty almost overwhelming for a warrior who had spent her life in the harsh, battle-scarred environments of her own world. The humans were primitive, but they had built something with their hands that felt real. Zira wasn't sure if she respected them for that or if it simply made her uncomfortable. There was no fear in her, only curiosity. As the first human soldiers appeared to face her, Zira couldn't help but laugh softly to herself. They were clad in flimsy armor, holding outdated weapons. There was no chance they could withstand the might of the Rayans. This would be over in no time. She stepped forward, her towering form casting a shadow over the humans, who stared up at her in a mix of awe and terror. "You're brave," Zira said, her voice laced with amusement, "but bravery will not save you." One of the human soldiers, a lanky man with a rugged face, stepped forward. His uniform was clearly not designed for the kind of war Zira had fought in, but there was a strange defiance in his eyes. "We're not giving up without a fight," the man said, his voice steady despite the fear that no doubt lurked beneath the surface. Zira raised an eyebrow. "You have no chance against us, but I admire your spirit. It will make this battle interesting." A few of her soldiers chuckled at the humans' defiance, but Zira remained focused. She knew that they could wipe out these humans with ease, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this invasion than she understood. As the battle commenced, Zira found herself thinking about the human soldiers' words. They weren't giving up. No, they were fighting back. And that, for some strange reason, intrigued her. The first few hours of the invasion were exactly as expected. The humans fought with desperation, their primitive weapons little more than annoyances to her forces. Zira moved through the chaos with precision, her blades slicing through enemies with lethal grace. Yet as the hours passed, something began to nag at her. These humans weren't like the others she had faced in battle. They weren't cowering. They weren't broken. They fought with a kind of unrelenting determination that was starting to get under her skin. "Commander," Calic's voice broke through her thoughts. "Should we proceed with the full assault?" Zira hesitated, her mind whirling with questions she hadn't anticipated. The humans weren't giving up. What did that mean? Was it a sign of their courage or their foolishness? She had always prided herself on knowing the tactics of every enemy, but these humans were unpredictable. "No," Zira said, her voice hard, yet somehow uncertain. "We hold off for now. I want to observe them." Calic looked at her, his confusion clear, but he nodded obediently, trusting in his commander's instincts. As Zira continued to watch the humans fight, a small, unexpected thought crept into her mind. Perhaps this war would be different after all. The dawn broke over Earth with a soft, golden hue, casting a surreal light across the landscape. Zira stood at the edge of the battlefield once again, her silhouette a stark contrast against the rising sun. It was quiet now, a strange stillness hanging in the air. The night had been long, the sounds of combat and cries of her enemies echoing across the valley. But now the smoke had settled, and all that remained was the quiet hum of her weapons and the distant sounds of retreating human forces. Zira adjusted the grip on her plasma blade, the familiar weight of the weapon reassuring, its smooth surface glinting in the early morning light. Her long blue ears flicked slightly, alert to every sound, every movement. She had fought on many worlds, faced countless enemies, but Earth, this strange blue planet, was beginning to feel different. There was something about these humans, something beyond their primitive weapons and clumsy tactics, that had her on edge. "Commander," came the voice of Calic over her communicator. The young lieutenant always sounded eager, his voice high-pitched and full of energy, even in the heat of battle. "Our scouts have reported that the humans are regrouping in the town just ahead. It's strange. They're not running. They're organizing. It's like they know we're coming." Zira narrowed her eyes, her mind processing the information. The humans had a way of defying expectations. They weren't like the other weak species the Rayans had encountered. They fought with a kind of persistence that had, against all odds, earned Zira's begrudging respect. "Very well," Zira replied, her voice calm and measured. "We'll advance, but keep your eyes open. They might surprise us again." The ground beneath her feet trembled slightly as the Rayans' massive war machines began to advance, their sleek metallic bodies cutting through the dirt with ease. Zira's battalion followed closely behind, their armor shining like a deadly beacon in the growing daylight. As they moved toward the town, Zira couldn't help but notice how the human forces seemed to be preparing for something. They were setting up barricades, reinforcing structures, even using scavenged equipment from their homes. The sight was oddly impressive. As they approached the outskirts of the town, Zira could see the humans positioning themselves, creating a defensive line. It was nothing compared to the sophisticated strategies of the Rayans, but it was effective in its own way. A small group of soldiers emerged from the buildings, armed with crude rifles and makeshift armor. They looked out of place, like children playing soldiers in a world they weren't prepared for. Yet their eyes, Zira could see it even from a distance, held a determination that no one, not even the most battle-hardened Ryans, could ignore. "They're not as foolish as they look," Zira muttered to herself, her voice tinged with reluctant admiration. "I wonder if they're all like this." Calic, ever the optimist, piped up again. "Commander, we should crush them now. It's obvious they're outmatched. Let's end this quickly." Zira shot him a quick, almost amused glance. "Calic, my young and eager friend, if I've learned anything in my time, it's that you should never underestimate your enemy, even when they seem ridiculous." Her words hung in the air as she watched the humans prepare. A slight breeze tousled her golden hair, and for the first time in hours, Zira allowed herself a moment to breathe. She was a warrior, forged in the heat of battle, but even she had to admit that something about the situation made her uneasy. "Ready your weapons," she ordered, snapping back to the present. "We advance." The Rayans moved forward, their weapons raised and ready. The human forces, though small, did not waver. They stood their ground as Zira and her battalion approached. It was a brave, if futile, stance, but there was something in their eyes that made Zira hesitate for a split second. She had expected fear, raw, unfiltered terror, but there was none of that here. The humans were ready to die for their world, and somehow that thought stuck with her as they closed the gap between them. Zira signaled for her troops to halt, watching as the humans stepped forward, rifles shaking in their hands. They looked terrified, yes, but there was an undeniable fierceness in their stance. "I don't suppose you'd like to surrender?" Zira called out, her voice rich with sarcasm. The human who stepped forward was different from the others. He was taller, with rough brown hair and a face covered in stubble. His eyes were locked on her, filled with something beyond fear, defiance. There was something about him that made Zira pause, her instincts telling her he was not to be underestimated. "We don't give up," he said, his voice steady, though the tremor in his hand betrayed his fear. "Not to the likes of you." Zira's eyes narrowed and she felt a strange pull, a flicker of respect for this human soldier. She didn't know why, but something about him felt familiar in a way. She couldn't explain it, but it intrigued her. "Well," Zira said with a wry smile, "I suppose we'll find out how long that lasts, won't we?" With a swift motion, she gestured to her troops. "Let's see if these humans can actually fight." The battle began, but this time something was different. As Zira led her forces into the heart of the town, she watched, fascinated, as the humans fought with a determination that was almost impossible to ignore. Their tactics were primitive, but they were quick, scrappy, and resourceful. They used their environment, their knowledge of the land, and their sheer willpower to create obstacles for the Rayans. Zira found herself smiling, despite herself. It was almost comical. One human soldier tried to throw a grenade, but instead of tossing it like a professional soldier, he panicked and tossed it too short. It exploded harmlessly at his feet, and he fell flat on his back, eyes wide. "I don't think that's how it's supposed to work," Zira muttered under her breath, stifling a laugh. But that soldier didn't give up. He scrambled to his feet, dusted himself off, and grabbed another grenade, determined to make it work this time. Zira shook her head, amused despite herself. Impressive. They refuse to quit, even when they fail. The battle raged on, and Zira's forces began to overpower the humans. Yet as the dust settled, she found herself admiring the tenacity of the humans. They fought with everything they had, throwing themselves into the fray without hesitation. It wasn't just bravery, it was something deeper, something Zira couldn't quite understand. As the battle wound down, and the last of the human forces retreated, Zira stood in the center of the battlefield, her gaze fixed on the horizon. There was still so much she didn't know about Earth and its people, but something was changing within her. The war that had seemed so simple, so straightforward, was no longer just a matter of conquest, and Zira was beginning to wonder if she could ever see the humans the same way again. Zira's mind raced as she paced in the quiet confines of the Rayans' War Command Center, located deep inside one of their towering, sleek ships. The metallic walls hummed with the soft, mechanical pulse of the engine, but Zira couldn't seem to focus on the quiet buzz of her surroundings. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on the battlefield, on the humans, and most notably, on the human soldier who had crossed her path. The battle had ended hours ago, with the Rayans claiming victory, but Zira hadn't been able to shake the strange unease that had followed her into the command center. Everything she had believed about humans had been shattered. The war, which had once seemed so simple, an unyielding clash between the superior Rayans and these primitive creatures, had turned into something far more complicated. "I'm starting to sound like Galactic," Zira muttered to herself. "Too much thinking, too little fighting." Her lieutenant's voice crackled through her communicator, snapping her out of her self-reflection. "Commander, you requested an update. The humans have fallen back into the remnants of their cities. We've destroyed their military outposts. It's, it's over. Should we begin preparations for the final assault? Zira hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing on her. Her initial reaction had been to wipe the humans off the face of the planet, to end this foolishness once and for all. But now every time she thought of the human soldier, the one with the defiant eyes, her heart beat just a little faster. He wasn't like the others. No, he was something different. Commander, Calic's voice was full of expectation. Zira looked out the viewport of the ship, her eyes scanning the barren landscape of Earth below. The atmosphere was still, the air almost too quiet for a planet that had just witnessed the devastation of an invasion. No, Zira said softly, her voice more certain than she had felt in days. We hold off. For now. The silence on the other end of the line was palpable. Calic knew better than to argue with her once she had made up her mind. Understood, he replied after a long pause. The decision was made, but Zira couldn't help but feel the growing tension between what she had been taught her entire life and the reality of what she was experiencing. For so long she had been a warrior, a tool of destruction, fighting for an empire that had always been certain of its superiority. Yet now, standing on the precipice of victory, she was beginning to question everything. I should never have taken this assignment, Zira whispered to herself. But even as the words left her mouth, she realized they were hollow. The truth was, she hadn't wanted to come here, but she had to. The Rayans had their reasons for wanting to conquer Earth, and it was her duty to follow through. But there was something about the humans, something that made her rethink the whole premise of the war. The door to her quarters slid open, and Zira turned, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her plasma blade. But it was only Calic, his eager face filled with concern. Commander, he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. I understand. I understand that this isn't easy, but you have to see reason. The humans are a threat to us. They'll rebuild. They'll come back. We can't leave them alive. Zira sighed, rubbing her temples. She had heard these arguments countless times from Calic and from the others. They didn't get it. They couldn't. She was the one who had stood on the battlefield, watched the humans fight, witnessed their stubborn refusal to bow to superior forces. What could they possibly understand? I know, she said quietly, looking up at Calic, but I don't think it's just about them being a threat anymore. I think it's about something else. Calic furrowed his brow. What do you mean? I think I've learned something from them. Zira shook her head, disbelieving even as she spoke the words. Humans, they don't fight because they know they can win. They fight because they refuse to accept defeat. I've never met anything like it. Calic remained silent, unsure how to respond. He had grown up hearing tales of the greatness of the Rayans, stories of invincibility. What Zira was suggesting was madness. But then again, she had never been one to conform to the rules of her people. That was what made her such a great warrior. Before he could say anything else, a loud knock came at the door. Zira's ears flicked, and she stood up, her stance becoming more rigid. The door slid open to reveal a soldier, breathless and panting. Commander, the soldier said, bowing slightly, we've located the human soldier you encountered during the battle. He's alive. Zira felt a chill run down her spine. The human? The one who had looked at her like she was something more than an enemy? What was he doing here? And why did her heart lurch at the thought of seeing him again? She glanced at Calic, her mind already racing. Bring him to me, she ordered. It wasn't long before the human soldier was brought before her. He was bruised, covered in dirt, but he was standing, and his eyes, those damn eyes, met hers with that same defiance she had seen on the battlefield. So, Zira said, her voice carefully neutral, you're the one who refuses to die. The human soldier straightened up, his voice surprisingly calm despite the dire situation. Seems like it, he said with a wry grin, though I suppose I could have died easier if I'd just let you kill me earlier. Zira's lips curled into a small smile, despite herself. You really don't know when to give up, do you? Giving up isn't an option for us, he replied, his eyes locking with hers. It's not just about survival, it's about fighting for something. For our homes, our families, for our future. For Earth, Zira stared at him, her mind racing. There was something in his words that resonated with her, something she hadn't considered before. What if the war wasn't about simply conquering a planet? What if it was about understanding what made the humans so resilient? "You'll die for your home, won't you?" Zira said quietly, more to herself than to him. The human soldier nodded. "We will, and we'll make sure that whatever happens, we fight until the end." Zira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. The battle she had thought she was fighting was no longer clear-cut. She wasn't just fighting an enemy, she was fighting herself. "We're stopping the assault," Zira said, her voice firm. "We're pulling back." Calic blinked, his mouth opening in surprise. "Commander, are you sure? The humans are a threat. If we don't finish this, they'll come back stronger." "No," Zira said, her gaze never leaving the human soldier. "They won't. I've seen enough. I've learned enough. This war, it's not worth fighting anymore." With that, Zira made the decision to halt the invasion. She didn't know what the future held for Earth, or for her, but one thing was certain: she had changed. And maybe, just maybe, the universe was a little less black and white than she had once believed.